Rain hammered against the roof of the Red Canyon Saloon like bullets on sheet metal. Thunder rolled across the Arizona desert, shaking the windows of the roadside bar. Inside, neon beer signs flickered red and blue, casting shadows that danced across worn wooden floors. It was 8:15 on a Thursday night, the kind of night most people stayed home. But Martha McColl wasn't home. She sat hunched in the corner booth, her 78-year-old hands trembling around a glass of water she hadn't touched. The overhead light caught the edge of a bandage peeking out from beneath her headscarf. Blood had seeped through the gauze, leaving a rust-colored stain. 4 young men surrounded her table. They laughed. Loud, cruel laughter that cut through the low murmur of country music from the jukebox. The one in front, Wade Ruter, leaned down until his face was inches from hers. A scar ran down his chin like a fault line. His breath smelled of cheap beer and cheaper cigarettes. "Last chance, Grandma," he said. His voice carried the casual violence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. 10,000 in cash, or you sign the papers, right here, right now. Martha's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her whole body shook. "What's that?" Wade cupped his ear, mocking. "Can't hear you." I don't have..." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't have what? Money?" Pike Drummond, 26 years old and built like a linebacker, grabbed her purse from the table. He dumped it out. A worn wallet. A rosary with half the beads missing. $17 in crumpled bills. Pathetic. Vernon Lassiter, the one they called Vic, kicked her water glass. It shattered against the floor. The bartender looked away. The 3 other patrons in the bar suddenly found their drinks very interesting. "Please," Martha tried to stand. Wade shoved her back down. "Please what? Please leave you alone?" Wade pulled a folded document from his jacket. "This is simple, old woman. You sign over your land to Mr. Carson. $250,000. That's generous considering nobody wants that dried up piece of dirt anyway. It's my home." Tears ran down Martha's weathered cheeks. "My husband, he left it to me." "Your husband's dead." Quincy Thorne, the youngest at 22, laughed. "Been dead what? 8 years? And you're sitting in that house all alone. No kids, no family, nobody even knows you exist." The words hit harder than fists, because they were almost true. Martha did live alone. Had lived alone since Earl died in 2017. The house was too big for one person, the land too much to maintain, but it was hers. The only thing she had left of a 45-year marriage. And these men were right about something else too. Nobody knew she was here. She hadn't told anyone about the threats that started 3 weeks ago. Hadn't mentioned the first time Wade and his crew cornered her outside the grocery store. Hadn't said a word about being shoved to the pavement 3 days ago, her head cracking against concrete. She never complained, never caused trouble, never asked for help. Even from her own son, especially from her own son. "I won't sign," she whispered. Wade's expression went cold. "Wrong answer." He grabbed her wrist. Twisted, Martha cried out. "Sign the paper." "I won't." Wade yanked her from the booth. Her small frame, barely 5 feet tall and 90 pounds soaking wet, offered no resistance. She stumbled, fell. Her knees hit the floor hard. The impact sent pain shooting up her spine. Pike laughed. "Look at her. Can barely stand." Vic moved in, his boot raised. "Maybe she needs help making decisions." The boot started to descend. Then the door exploded open. Wind and rain blasted into the bar. Every head turned. A man stood in the doorway. Massive, 6'3", shoulders like a bull, wearing a black leather jacket that glistened with rainwater. Long gray hair plastered to his skull. A beard that hadn't seen a razor in weeks. Scars visible even in the dim light. And on his back, catching the neon glow, the unmistakable insignia, a winged death's head. Hell's Angels. He didn't move, just stood there, water pooling at his boots, eyes scanning the room with the methodical precision of someone trained to assess threats in seconds. His gaze landed on the scene in the corner. 4 men, 1 elderly woman on the floor. For a moment, everything stopped. Even the jukebox seemed to quiet. The only sound was rain drumming against the roof and the slow, deliberate click of boots on wood as the biker stepped inside. Wade straightened. "Bars closed to your kind. Get out." The biker didn't respond. He took another step, then another, moving with the unhurried confidence of a man who'd walked into worse situations and walked out alive. He got closer, close enough to see the woman's face, and froze. The color drained from his weathered features. His jaw clenched. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, shock, then something darker. Rage. "Mom?" The word came out raw, broken, like something torn from his chest. The woman on the floor looked up. Her eyes went wide. "Garrett?" Time fractured. Wade Rutger had been in his share of bar fights, had threatened dozens of people, had built a reputation in Sedona as someone you didn't cross. But he'd never seen a transformation like this. The biker's entire body language changed. The controlled calm evaporated, replaced by something primal. His hands curled into fists. The muscles in his neck stood out like cables. "That's your mother?" Wade's voice cracked slightly. His eyes darted to the Hells Angels patch. Back to the old woman. Back to the biker. She never said she had a son. Garrett Reaper McColl didn't answer. He was staring at his mother, at the blood-stained bandage, the bruises on her arms, the way she cradled her wrist. His mother, who he hadn't seen in 2 months, who lived alone 40 miles away, who was supposed to be safe. "What did you do to her?" The question came out quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes explosions. Wade tried to recover his bravado. "Listen, we were just having a conversation about—" "I asked you a question." Garrett took a step forward. "What did you do?" "We didn't—" Her wrist is swelling. There's blood on her face. She's on the floor of a bar with 4 men standing over her. Another step. "So I'm going to ask one more time, and if I don't like the answer, you're not walking out of here. What did you do to my mother?" Pike made the mistake of reaching for something in his jacket. Garrett moved. Later, witnesses would disagree on exactly what happened. Some said he covered the distance in 2 strides. Others swore it was faster. But everyone agreed on the result. Pike went down first. A single strike to the solar plexus that folded him like paper. The knife he'd been reaching for clattered to the floor. Vic lunged. Garrett caught his arm mid-swing, twisted it behind his back with a precision that spoke of military training, and slammed him face first into the nearest table. Vic didn't get up. Quincy tried to run, made it 3 steps before Garrett's boot swept his legs. The young man crashed down, skull bouncing off the floor with a sound that made everyone wince. 15 seconds. 3 men down. Wade Rutger stood alone, breathing hard, hand moving toward his waistband. "Don't." Garrett's voice could have cut steel. Wade's hand stopped, but he didn't move it away. "You're making a mistake, old man." The only mistake here was made by whoever thought they could hurt a 78-year-old woman and get away with it. Garrett moved between Wade and Martha. "Now you're going to tell me who sent you." "Nobody sent—" "Wrong answer." Garrett's hands shot out, grabbed Wade's collar, and lifted him onto his toes. "I spent 6 months in the Kuwaiti desert getting shot at by people tougher than you. I've broken bones most people don't know they have. And right now, looking at my mother on that floor, I'm about 3 seconds from showing you what I learned." Wade's courage crumbled. "Richard Carson, he sent us. He wants her land." "For what?" "Resort development. He's been buying up property for years. She's the last holdout." Garrett held him there for another moment, then released him, so suddenly Wade stumbled backward. "Here's what's going to happen." Garrett's voice dropped to a deadly calm. "You're going to leave, all 4 of you. You're going to get in whatever vehicle you came in, and you're going to drive away. And if I ever," he leaned in close, "ever see you near my mother again, they won't find enough of you to fill a shoebox. Understand?" Wade nodded frantically. "I can't hear you." "Yes, yes, I understand." "Good. Now get your friends and get out." Wade scrambled to help Pike up. Vic was already stumbling toward the door, holding his bleeding nose. Quincy crawled on hands and knees. They fled into the rain. The bar was silent except for the storm outside and Martha's quiet sobs. Garrett turned, dropped to his knees beside his mother. All the violence drained from his face, replaced by something rawer, more painful. "Mom, God, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Martha looked up at her son, this man she'd raised alone after his father died when Garrett was 9, who joined the Marines at 18 because he thought it was the only way out of poverty, who'd come back from war changed, harder, distant, who'd found brotherhood in a motorcycle club because civilian life felt like a foreign country, who she loved more than anything in the world, who she'd been too afraid to call. "Why were you here?" she whispered. "I was just driving through, stopped for a beer. I didn't know." His voice broke. "Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't want to be a burden." "A burden?" Garrett's hands shook as he gently examined her injuries. "Mom, you could never—" He stopped, took a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was steadier. "How long has this been going on?" Martha looked away. 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and you didn't tell me. You have your own life, your business, the club. I thought I could handle it." Garrett closed his eyes. 30 years of training himself to be hard, to be strong, to never show weakness. All of it crumbled looking at his mother's bruised face. "I should have been here," he said quietly. "I should have visited more, called more. I let 2 months go by without—" He stopped again. "This is on me." "No." Martha's hand, the one that wasn't swollen, touched his face. "This is on them, on those men, on whoever sent them." Garrett opened his eyes. The softness was gone, replaced by something colder, more focused. "Richard Carson," he said. Martha nodded. "Tell me everything." They moved to a booth away from the broken glass. The bartender, an older man with a conscience that had been dormant until a Hell's Angel walked in, brought a first aid kit without being asked, then made himself scarce. Martha's voice trembled as she spoke, but she told it all. Richard Carson, 56 years old, Sedona's Golden Boy developer, 3-term city council member, owned half the commercial real estate in town, wanted her 2 acres because it sat right in the middle of the 20-acre parcel he was assembling for a luxury resort, had made 5 offers over 3 years, each one higher than the last. Each one refused. Until 6 months ago, when the offers stopped and the pressure started. First, it was subtle. Property tax assessments that seemed too high. Building code violations for a fence that had stood for 30 years. Health department complaints about her well water. Then it got personal. Wade Rutgers showed up 4 weeks ago. Said Mr. Carson was disappointed Martha wouldn't sell. Said the offer was being lowered to $250,000. Take it or leave it. She left it. 3 weeks ago, Wade and his crew cornered her outside the grocery store. Shoved her. Told her old women living alone sometimes had accidents. House fires. Break-ins. Falls. 2 weeks ago, they threw bottles at her house in the middle of the night. Shattered her kitchen window. 1 week ago, they ran her off the road. Her car ended up in a ditch. She walked 2 miles home. 3 days ago, they jumped her on her front porch. Wade grabbed her wrist, twisted until something popped, shoved her down. Her head hit the concrete steps, blood everywhere. Still, she didn't call anyone. Couldn't call the police. Wade had mentioned that Sheriff Blackwood and Carson played golf together every Tuesday. Mentioned it with a smile. Couldn't call neighbors. Didn't want to drag them into this. Couldn't call Garrett. Wouldn't drag him into this either. So she stayed silent, never complained. Until today when she got a text message, Red Canyon Saloon, 8 p.m., bring $10,000 cash or sign the papers. Final offer. She'd come because she didn't know what else to do, came with $17 in her purse and her dead husband's old revolver in her coat pocket. A gun she'd never fired, didn't even know if it still worked. Came prepared to die rather than lose the last piece of Earl she had left. As she spoke, Garrett's expression never changed, but his knuckles went white, gripping the edge of the table. The wood creaked under the pressure. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked again when she finished. Martha looked at her hands. "Because I knew what you'd do. What I'd do. You'd come, you'd fight, you'd put yourself in danger." She met his eyes. "I've already lost your father. I've watched you go to war, watched you get hurt. I couldn't ask you to risk yourself again. Not for this." "Mom." Garrett reached across the table, took her good hand gently. "You're not asking. This is what sons do. This is what family does. You have your life. I won't ruin it. You are my life." The words came out fierce. Absolute. "Everything I did, everything I survived, it was to come back to you. You think a piece of land in Sedona is worth more than that?" Tears spilled down Martha's cheeks. "It's not just land, it's home. It's where Earl and I raised you, where we built everything. If I lose it, I lose him all over again." Garrett squeezed her hand. "Then we don't lose it." "But Carson is a bully with money, and bullies I know how to handle." He stood, helped her to her feet. "Come on, we're going home. You're home, and I'm staying there until this is finished." "Garrett, you can't." "Mom," he looked down at her. 50 years of life between them, wars and losses and struggles they'd both endured. "Please, let me do this. Let me protect you." Martha looked up at her son, saw the little boy who used to wake up screaming from nightmares, saw the teenager who enlisted because he wanted to make something of himself, saw the man who came back from Kuwait with eyes that had seen too much, saw her child asking for permission to be what he'd always been, her protector. "Okay," she whispered. Rain pounded the windshield of Garrett's pickup truck. Martha sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in his leather jacket, still trembling. Not from cold, from the aftershock of fear releasing its grip. The desert highway was empty, no other headlights, just them and the storm. Garrett drove with one hand on the wheel, the other hovering near his mother like he was afraid she'd disappear. His Harley sat in the truck bed, secured under a tarp. Everything had changed in an hour. "When was the last time you ate?" Garrett asked. "This morning. Toast." "That's it?" "I wasn't hungry." He didn't respond, but his jaw clenched tighter. They drove in silence for a while. The wipers beat a steady rhythm. Thunder rolled in the distance. Martha stared out at the darkness. "I tried to be strong," she said suddenly. "Like you. Like Earl. I thought if I just didn't make trouble, didn't complain, it would stop." "Strength isn't suffering in silence, Mom." "Then what is it?" Garrett thought about that. Thought about Kuwait, where he carried a wounded Marine 3 miles under fire. Thought about the club, where strength meant brotherhood, loyalty, standing together. Thought about tonight, seeing his mother on that floor. "Strength is knowing your limits," he said finally, "and trusting someone enough to ask for help when you reach them." Martha laughed, a broken sound. "I've never been good at that." "I know, neither have I. We're stubborn that way." She looked at him. Even in the dark, she could see his profile. Strong jaw, scarred hands. Her son, her warrior. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" she said. "Yeah, we are." More silence. Then Martha asked the question she'd been afraid to ask. "What are you going to do?" Garrett's expression hardened. "First, I'm making sure you're safe. Then I'm finding out everything about Richard Carson. Then," he paused, "then I'm going to end this. Garrett, he's powerful. He has money, connections. So do I. Martha blinked. You do? I'm a Hell's Angel, Mom. We're not just a motorcycle club. We're family, brothers. And when someone hurts family, he glanced at her, we take care of it. I don't want you to do anything illegal. I won't. Promise me. I promise I'll handle this the right way. Legal, if possible. But Mom, he looked at her, if the law won't protect you, I will, by whatever means necessary. They pulled onto Martha's property. The house sat dark except for the porch light. A small, single-story ranch with peeling paint and a sagging roof. 2 acres of scrub brush and memories. Worth $400,000 to a developer. Worth everything to the woman who lived there. Garrett parked, helped his mother out, walked her to the door with his arm around her shoulders. Scanned the property with trained eyes, looking for threats, finding none, yet. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and old books, exactly as he remembered from childhood. Martha moved to turn on lights, but Garrett stopped her. Let me check first. He went through each room, methodical, thorough, checking windows, locks, closets, the bathroom. When he was satisfied, he came back to find Martha sitting on the couch, still wearing his jacket, looking small and fragile in a way that broke his heart. All clear, he said. Thank you. He sat beside her. The couch creaked under his weight. I'm staying tonight, on the couch. You don't have to. I'm staying, he said firmly, and tomorrow we're figuring this out, together. Martha nodded. Then after a long moment, she leaned against him, rested her head on his shoulder, something she hadn't done since he was a teenager. Garrett put his arm around her, held his mother while the storm raged outside, and made a promise to himself. Richard Carson would pay for this. Every bruise, every moment of fear, every tear, there would be a reckoning. Thunder rolled across the desert. Lightning lit up the windows. In the distance, somewhere in the darkness, Wade Rutger was making a phone call, telling Richard Carson that they had a problem. A big problem, with a Hell's Angel patch and nothing left to lose. The storm was just beginning. Dawn broke over the Arizona desert like a promise. Or a threat. Garrett wasn't sure which. He'd been awake since 4:30, sitting on Martha's porch with a cup of black coffee going cold in his hands. Hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother on that barroom floor, saw the fear in her face, the resignation, like she'd accepted this was how her story ended. No, not on his watch. The sun climbed higher, painting the scrub brush gold and red. Beautiful country. His mother's land stretched out in front of him, 2 acres of nothing special to anyone except the woman who'd lived here for 45 years, who'd buried her husband under the cottonwood tree out back, who'd raised a son here despite poverty and loneliness and a world that seemed determined to break her. Garrett heard movement inside. Martha, awake. He checked on her 3 times during the night, each time she was sleeping fitfully, making small sounds of distress. Dreams or memories, both probably. The screen door creaked. Martha emerged wearing an old bathrobe, her gray hair unpinned and falling around her shoulders. In the morning light, she looked every one of her 78 years. Fragile, mortal, his mother. You're up early, she said. Never went to bed. She sat beside him on the porch steps. They'd sat like this 1,000 times when he was young, before the war. Before everything changed. I made coffee, she offered. I'm good. They watched the sunrise together, neither speaking. The silence between them comfortable in a way silence rarely was. Finally, Martha broke it. What happens now? Garrett set down his cup. Now I make some calls. Find out everything about Richard Carson. His business, his connections, his weak points. And then we take him down. Legal, clean, so he can't hurt you or anyone else again. Martha nodded slowly. You really think we can do that? Against someone like him? Garrett turned to look at her. Mom, I once walked 12 miles through hostile territory with a broken leg to get my unit to an extraction point. I've rebuilt engines from scrap metal. I've survived things that would kill most people. He paused. Richard Carson is just a bully with a checkbook, and I've been dealing with bullies my whole life. A small smile touched Martha's lips, the first real smile he'd seen from her since last night. You always were stubborn. Wonder where I got that? Not from me. I've never been stubborn about anything. Mom, you refused to sell your land to a man who sent thugs after you. You showed up to that bar last night knowing you might not come home. That's not stubborn? Martha looked down at her hands. The left wrist was swollen, purple-black. That's different. That's just not giving up what's mine. Exactly, stubborn. Garrett stood, offered his hand. Come on, let's get you looked at properly. That wrist needs an x-ray. I'm fine. You're not fine, and we're going to the hospital. Garrett, non-negotiable, Mom. Martha sighed but took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. You're worse than your father ever was. Good. By noon, Garrett had made 8 phone calls. The first was to Boone Kavanaugh, Sledge, vice president of the Hells Angels Flagstaff chapter, and the closest thing Garrett had to a best friend. The conversation was short. My mother was attacked. I need help. Say when and where. My place. 2 hours. We'll be there. The second call was to Flint Barlow, the chapter's road captain. Former Army Ranger, dishonorable discharge for beating an officer who was abusing a local woman in Afghanistan. Flint didn't believe in half measures. The 3rd through 8th calls were to other members. The message was the same. Family emergency. All hands. By 2 p.m., 6 Harley-Davidsons sat in Martha's driveway. 6 men, ages ranging from 48 to 63, stood in her living room. Tattooed, scarred, dangerous looking in the way men who've lived hard lives always are. But when Martha offered them coffee and cookies, every single one said yes, ma'am, and thank you, ma'am, like they were in Sunday school. Garrett made introductions. Mom, you know Sledge. Boone Kavanaugh stepped forward. 58, built like a fire hydrant, completely bald with a beard down to his chest. Mrs. McColl, been too long. Hello, Boone, you're looking well. You too, ma'am, though I hear you've had some trouble. A little. Flint Barlow came next. 51, lean and wiry, eyes that never stopped moving. Ma'am, sorry to meet under these circumstances. Then Axel Kane, 55, former truck driver, hands like catcher's mitts. Cyrus Webb. 63, the oldest in the chapter, former Marine like Garrett. Luther Hayes. 48, the youngest, former corrections officer. And Vaughn Cross, 59, Vietnam vet, barely spoke but listened to everything. Martha looked at the 6 men crowding her small living room. You all came because Garrett asked? No, ma'am, Sledge said. We came because someone hurt our brother's mother. That makes it our business. Garrett saw his mother's eyes water. She quickly turned away, busying herself with coffee cups. These men, strangers to her, had dropped everything to help. Because that's what family did. When everyone had coffee, Garrett laid it out. The whole story. Richard Carson, the land grab, Wade Rutger and his crew, the escalating violence, his mother's silence, last night's confrontation. The room grew quieter as he spoke. By the end, the temperature had dropped about 20 degrees, despite the Arizona heat outside. Flint spoke first. Carson, I know that name. He tried to buy my brother's garage 3 years ago. When my brother refused, suddenly the property failed a dozen inspections. Cost him 30 grand in upgrades. Eventually had to sell anyway. Same thing happened to my cousin, Luther added. Carson wanted his fishing cabin up near Flagstaff. Cousin said no. 2 months later, the cabin burned down. Fire marshal ruled it accidental, but Cyrus nodded slowly. I've heard 8, maybe 9 similar stories. Always the same pattern. Carson makes an offer. Victim refuses. Problems start. Eventually, people sell just to make it stop. How's he getting away with it? Garrett asked. Connections, Sledge said. City council, county commissioners, sheriff's department. Carson's been greasing palms for 20 years. He's untouchable. Nobody's untouchable. Maybe, but he's close. Garrett looked at his brothers. I need two things. First, information. Everything on Carson. Business deals, property holdings, associates, especially anything illegal. Done, Flint said. I've got contacts in county records. I can pull property transactions, liens, lawsuits. Second, I need protection for my mother. Carson won't stop because I roughed up his boys. He'll escalate. I'll stay here, Vaughn offered, first time he'd spoken. I can watch the house, armed. I'll spell you, Luther said, 12-hour shifts. Garrett felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Sledge said. What's your play here, Reaper? We go after Carson directly, we're asking for war. Not war, justice. How? Legal route first. We gather evidence, take it to the state police or FBI. Carson's protected locally, but if we can prove a pattern of criminal activity, extortion, arson, assault, federal charges stick. And if the legal route doesn't work? Garrett's expression went flat. Then we get creative. The next 3 days were a masterclass in investigation. Flint pulled property records going back 15 years. A clear pattern emerged. Carson had acquired 23 properties in Sedona through various shell companies. Of those, 18 had previous owners who sold for significantly below market value. Of those 18, 12 had filed police reports for harassment, vandalism, or threats in the 6 months before selling. None of the reports led anywhere. All were closed without charges. Sheriff Vernon Blackwood's signature was on every single closure. Luther tracked down 5 former property owners willing to talk. Their stories matched Martha's almost exactly. Offers, refusals, escalation, fear, eventually defeat. One woman, 82-year-old Patricia Landry, broke down crying on the phone. He took my home, the house my parents built in 1947. I had to sell because I couldn't take the fear anymore. Every night wondering if they'd burn it down with me inside. Why didn't you fight back? Luther asked gently. Fight? Against Richard Carson? With what? He owns this town. He owned the sheriff. She paused. He told me if I caused trouble, my grandson would have an accident. My grandson is 6 years old. What was I supposed to do? Luther thanked her and hung up, looked at Garrett. This guy is worse than we thought. I know. Axel came through with financial records. Carson's primary company, Red Rock Development, had revenue of $42 million last year. But the interesting part was the subsidiary companies. At least 8 shell corporations that all trace back to Carson used to purchase properties and hide transactions. Classic money laundering setup, Axel said, or close to it. He's moving money around to avoid taxes and hide where it comes from. Can we prove it? Not without subpoenas, but it's definitely shady. Cyrus, meanwhile, had been talking to his old Marine contacts. Turned out Wade Rutger had a record. Assault, theft, drug possession. 3 arrests, 2 convictions, currently on probation. So he's a career criminal working for Carson, Garrett said. Gets better. Rutger's probation officer is Mark Brennan, who happens to be Sheriff Blackwood's brother-in-law. Of course he is. It's a closed loop, Sledge said, looking at the information they'd compiled. Carson pays Rutger to do the dirty work. Rutger's protected by Blackwood. Blackwood's protected by Carson's money and political connections. Victims are too scared to talk, and even if they do, nothing happens because Blackwood kills the investigations. Garrett stared at the web of corruption they'd mapped out on Martha's dining room table. We need leverage, something big enough that even Carson's protection can't save him. Like what? Like Wade Rutger confessing, on tape, naming Carson directly. Flint raised an eyebrow. You think he'll do that? No, but I think we can persuade him. Finding Wade Rutger took less time than expected. The man was cocky, stupid, or both. He was drinking at the Desert Ridge Tavern 3 nights after the Red Canyon incident like nothing had happened. Garrett, Sledge, and Flint walked in at 9 p.m. The bar was crowded. Country music, pool tables, the smell of beer and fried food. Wade sat at a corner table with Pike Drummond, laughing about something. The laughter died when 3 Hell's Angels approached their table. Wade's face went white. Oh, shit. Outside, Garrett said, not a request. I'm not going anywhere with you. Sledge leaned down, spoke quietly. You can walk out with us now, or we can drag you. Your choice. But either way, we're having a conversation. Wade looked around the bar, saw 40 people who suddenly found their drinks fascinating. No help coming. Fine. Outside. The parking lot was dark, gravel crunching under boots. Wade tried to run the moment they cleared the door, made it 10 feet before Flint tackled him. They dragged him behind the building, out of sight, out of earshot. What do you want? Wade's voice shook. Answers, Garrett said. Who hired you? Nobody hired me. I told you we were just... Sledge grabbed Wade's collar, slammed him against the brick wall. Try again. I don't... Richard Carson. You work for him. We know this. What we need is proof. Wade's eyes darted between the 3 men. I can't. He'll kill me. And you think we won't? Flint asked mildly. You can't. It's illegal. Garrett laughed. No humor in it. You're worried about legal? After what you did to my mother? That was just business. Carson wanted the land. We helped convince her to sell. By beating a 78-year-old woman? I didn't. Wade stopped. Realized what he'd just admitted. Garrett pulled out his phone. Pressed stop on the recording app. Thanks. Wade's face fell. You recorded that? Every word. You just confessed to assault and extortion. Should be enough for the state police. Wait. Wade grabbed at Garrett's jacket. You can't do this. Carson will know it came from me. Should have thought of that before you put your hands on my mother. Please, I'll do anything. Garrett paused. Anything? Yes. Give us Carson, everything. The other properties, the payoffs, all of it. Testify if needed. Wade hesitated. If I do that, I'm a dead man. If you don't, you're going to prison. And I'll make sure every inmate knows you beat up old ladies for money. How long you think you'll last? The threat hung in the air. Wade's shoulders slumped. What do you want? Everything. Documentation if you have it. Names, dates, amounts. Every property Carson targeted. Every payoff to Blackwood. All of it. I don't have documentation. Carson's too smart for that. Then testimony. You tell us everything you know, we record it, and we take it to the FBI. FBI? Carson owns the locals, but he doesn't own the federal government. Wade was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but I want protection. Witness protection or something. We'll see what we can arrange. They took Wade to a secure location, one of the club members' houses, empty while the owner was out of state. Spent 6 hours getting his story, every detail, every property, every threat. The picture that emerged was damning. Carson had run this scheme for at least 8 years. 23 properties acquired through intimidation. Payments to Sheriff Blackwood totaling over $200,000. Payments to building inspectors, tax assessors, even a county judge. It was systematic, organized, criminal. And Wade Rutger, small-time thug, had just given them everything they needed to prove it. As they wrapped up, Garrett's phone buzzed. A text from Vaughn, watching Martha's house. Problem: 3 vehicles just pulled up. Armed men, at least 6, moving toward the house. Garrett's blood went cold. We have to go, now. They ran for their bikes. Under siege. Martha was making tea when she heard the vehicles. 3 SUVs, black, expensive. They stopped in front of her house, blocking the driveway. Her heart started racing. Vaughn appeared from the back bedroom where he'd been watching. "Mrs. McColl, get away from the windows! Now!" "What's happening?" "Company, the bad kind." 6 men climbed out of the SUVs. Well-dressed, armed, not hiding the guns. One of them, tall and silver-haired, walked toward the front door like he owned the place. Richard Carson. Martha recognized him from newspaper photos, city council meetings, charity events, always smiling, always respectable. Not smiling now. He knocked, polite, civilized. "Mrs. McColl? I know you're in there. I'd like to have a word." Vaughn positioned himself near the door, drew his own weapon, spoke quietly to Martha. "Don't answer." "She doesn't need to answer," Carson called out. "I'll talk through the door if I have to." "Mrs. McColl, I'm here to make you a final offer. $500,000 for your property. Cash. Today. You sign the papers and all of this unpleasantness goes away." Martha's hands shook, but she didn't answer. "I know your son got involved. I know he thinks he can protect you. But Mrs. McColl," Carson's voice turned harder, "your son is one man. I have resources he can't imagine. This ends one of 2 ways. You sell to me or you lose everything. Your house, your land, maybe your son if he keeps pushing." Vaughn spoke into his phone, calling for backup. "I'm a reasonable man," Carson continued. "I don't want violence. I want a simple business transaction. But if you force my hand," he paused. "Accidents happen. Houses burn. People get hurt. I'd hate for anything to happen to such a lovely old woman." The threat was clear, unmistakable. Martha felt something inside her shift. For 3 weeks, she'd been silent, afraid, accepting. No more. She walked to the door. Vaughn tried to stop her, but she gently moved his hand aside. Unlocked the deadbolt. Opened the door 6 inches, just enough to see Carson's face. "Mr. Carson," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "I'm not selling. Not for 500,000. Not for 5 million. This is my home. My husband built this house with his own hands. He's buried under the tree in the backyard, and I'll die before I let you take it." Carson's smile was thin, cold. "Mrs. McColl, you're making a terrible mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Your son can't protect you forever. My son doesn't have to. I'm protecting myself." She closed the door, locked it, turned to Vaughn, who was staring at her with something like respect. "Mrs. McColl, that was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen." "Probably both." Outside, Carson stood on the porch for another moment, then walked back to his SUV, spoke to his men, pointed at the house. They didn't leave. They settled in, watching, waiting. A siege. Vaughn checked his ammunition. "Backup's coming, but we might have a problem before they get here." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where these guys decide to test our defenses." As if on cue, 2 of Carson's men started walking toward the house. Casual, like they were just going to knock on the door again, but their hands were on their weapons. Vaughn stepped onto the porch. "That's close enough." The men kept walking. "I said that's close enough." They stopped. One of them, a thick-necked man with a crew cut, smiled. "This is private property. Mr. Carson's property. You're trespassing." "This is Mrs. McColl's property, and you're the ones trespassing." Not for long. The sound of motorcycles cut through the tension. Loud. Getting closer. 12 Harley-Davidsons roared up the driveway. Hell's Angels. The entire Flagstaff chapter, plus some. Garrett swung off his bike before it fully stopped, took in the scene. Carson's men, Vaughn on the porch, his mother visible through the window. He walked straight to Carson's SUV, rapped on the window. Carson lowered it, still smiling. "Mr. McColl, nice of you to join us." "Leave, now. This is a public road." This is private property. You're trespassing. And you just threatened my mother. I made a business offer. You made a threat. Garrett leaned in close. Here's my counteroffer. You get in these vehicles, you leave, and you never come near my mother again. And maybe, just maybe, I don't go to the FBI with everything I know about your operation. Carson's smile faltered. You don't know anything. Wade Rutger, 6 hours of testimony, every property, every payoff, every threat. Garrett straightened. I've got enough to bury you, Carson. The only question is whether I use it. That would be your word against mine. Wade's a convicted criminal. Nobody will believe him. Maybe, but I'm willing to find out. Are you? The two men stared at each other, the air between them electric. Finally, Carson spoke. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. You just don't know it yet. Carson raised his window, started his engine. His men climbed back into their vehicles. They left, tires spitting gravel. But Garrett knew the truth. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. 2 days after Carson's visit, Garrett sat in a windowless conference room at the Phoenix FBI field office. Across the table sat Special Agent Julia Brennan, 43, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and her partner, Agent Thomas Whitmore, 51, gray at the temples and wearing a wedding ring that had seen better days. Between them lay 6 hours of recorded testimony from Wade Rutger, property records spanning 8 years, financial documents showing shell companies and suspicious transactions, and written statements from 5 victims willing to go on record. Brennan listened to the first 10 minutes of Wade's confession, then stopped the recording. Where did you get this? Wade Rutger gave it voluntarily, Garrett said. After you assaulted him? After we had a conversation. He wasn't physically harmed. Brennan looked at him. Mr. McColl, I appreciate what you're trying to do here, but evidence obtained through coercion. He wasn't coerced. He was scared. There's a difference. Is there? She leaned back. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a motorcycle gang threatening a witness to obtain testimony. We're not a gang, we're a club, and we didn't threaten anyone. We just asked questions. Whitmore spoke up. Agent Brennan, I've been listening to this recording. Rutger's statements are detailed, specific, and corroborated by these property records. Whether or not it's admissible in court, it gives us probable cause to investigate. We've been investigating Carson for 6 months, Brennan said, money laundering primarily. But we haven't been able to prove anything. He's careful, uses layers of shell companies, cash transactions, offshore accounts. So you know he's dirty, Garrett said. Knowing and proving are different things. What if I told you he threatened my mother 2 days ago, in front of witnesses? That got their attention. Brennan sat forward. Tell me everything. Garrett laid it out. Carson showing up with armed men, the threats, the attempt to intimidate, Vaughn Cross as a witness, the entire Hells Angels chapter as backup witnesses. When he finished, Brennan and Whitmore exchanged looks. That's direct evidence of extortion, Whitmore said. If we can prove it happened the way Mr. McColl says. You think I'm lying? I think you're emotionally invested. I think you want Carson to pay for what happened to your mother. And I think that might color your perception of events. Garrett felt his temper rising, forced it down. Agent Brennan, my mother is 78 years old. She's been terrorized for 3 weeks. Beaten, threatened. Her home, the only thing she has left of my father, is being stolen from her by a man who thinks money makes him untouchable. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to investigate. Talk to the other victims. Look at the pattern. Do your job. Silence. Then Brennan nodded slowly. Okay, we'll investigate. But Mr. McColl, I need you to understand something. If we move on this, it has to be by the book. No more vigilante justice. No more confrontations. You let us handle it from here. And if you can't touch him, if he's got too many people in his pocket, then we keep digging until we find something that sticks. But you don't. Are we clear? Garrett wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her that the system had already failed his mother and a dozen other victims. That waiting for bureaucracy to grind forward while Carson continued to operate was unacceptable. But he also knew that without federal help, Carson really was untouchable. "Clear," he said finally. "Good. Leave the evidence with us. We'll be in touch." Outside the building, Sledge was waiting by the bikes. "How'd it go?" "They're investigating. Told me to back off." "You gonna listen?" Garrett looked out at the Phoenix skyline, skyscrapers gleaming in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Richard Carson was conducting business as usual, confident in his immunity. "For now," Garrett said. 3 weeks passed, the longest 3 weeks of Garrett's life. He moved into Martha's house, set up in the spare bedroom that still had his old wrestling trophies from high school gathering dust on the shelves. Spent his days working remote from his laptop, handling garage business via phone and email. Spent his nights on the porch, watching the road. The Hells Angels maintained a rotating watch. 2 brothers at the house at all times, armed, alert. Carson didn't make another appearance, but his message was clear. He was waiting, biding his time. Martha tried to return to normal life. Grocery shopping, gardening, her weekly bridge game with 3 other widows from church. But normal was a memory now. She jumped at loud noises, checked the locks 3 times before bed, kept looking over her shoulder. Garrett watched his mother diminish, saw the fear eating at her, and it killed him. "We should have handled this ourselves," he told Sledge one night. They were sitting on the porch, sharing a 6-pack, watching the stars. "FBI's our best shot," Sledge said. "Our best shot is taking Carson out ourselves, permanently. And spend the rest of your life in prison? How does that help your mother?" Garrett didn't answer. "Look, I get it," Sledge continued. "You want blood. So do I. But Reaper, you've got to play this smart. Carson's powerful, but he's not a god. He'll make a mistake. And when he does, the feds will nail him. And if he doesn't, then we revisit our options, but give the system a chance first." The system got its chance on a Tuesday morning in late September. Garrett was making breakfast when his phone rang. "FBI, Agent Brennan. Mr. McColl, we're executing search warrants on Richard Carson's properties this morning. 6 locations, including his home and primary office. I wanted to give you a heads up." Garrett's heart rate picked up. "You found something." "We found a lot of things. The property records you provided led us to financial irregularities. The financial irregularities led us to offshore accounts. The offshore accounts led us to a paper trail connecting Carson to multiple criminal enterprises beyond just the property scam." "What kind of enterprises?" "Money laundering for a drug trafficking organization out of Mexico. Carson's been cleaning money through his development projects for at least 5 years. We estimate he's moved over $20 million. Garrett absorbed this. So the property thing was just a side business, a way to acquire assets while running his primary operation. The intimidation, the violence, that was all Carson being greedy, wanting more. "When are you arresting him?" "Warrants are being served now. If we find what we expect to find, Carson will be in custody by end of day." "And Sheriff Blackwood?" "Him too, along with 3 other county officials. This is going to be big, Mr. McColl. National news big." After she hung up, Garrett sat at the kitchen table, coffee forgotten. Martha appeared in the doorway, wearing her bathrobe, hair uncombed. "Who was that?" "The FBI. They're arresting Carson. Today." Martha's hand went to her throat. "Really?" "Really." She sat down heavily, started crying, not sad tears, relief. 3 weeks of fear draining out all at once. Garrett moved to her side, put his arm around her shoulders. "It's over, Mom. It's finally over. I can't believe it. I thought he'd win, that people like him always win. Not this time." They turned on the news at noon. Sure enough, footage of FBI agents entering Red Rock Development headquarters. Carson being let out in handcuffs, suit jacket over his head. Sheriff Blackwood being perp-walked from his own office. The anchor's voice was grave. Federal authorities have arrested prominent Sedona developer Richard Carson on charges of money laundering, racketeering, extortion, and conspiracy. Sources say this is part of a larger investigation into corruption in Yavapai County. We'll have more as this story develops. Martha watched the screen, watched the man who terrorized her being put into a federal vehicle, watched her nightmare end on live television. "Thank you," she whispered. Garrett squeezed her hand. "You did this. You stood up to him. You refused to give in. That's what made this possible." "I was so scared." "I know, but you did it anyway. That's what courage is." The legal process ground forward with bureaucratic inevitability. Carson's bail was set at $5 million. He posted it within hours. But the judge imposed strict conditions. No contact with witnesses, no leaving the state, electronic monitoring. Carson hired the best lawyers money could buy, a team from a Phoenix firm known for defending white-collar criminals. They filed motions to suppress evidence, to dismiss charges, to delay the trial. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Vance, fought back. The case was solid. Financial records, witness testimony, the offshore accounts, Carson's own emails directing various illegal activities. And then there was Wade Ruter. Wade took a plea deal, 15 years reduced to 8 in exchange for full cooperation. He testified before a grand jury, gave depositions, named names. The dominoes fell. Sheriff Blackwood pleaded guilty to corruption charges rather than face trial. 2 county commissioners resigned. A building inspector was arrested. A tax assessor fled to Mexico. The trial began in February, 6 months after that night in the Red Canyon Saloon. 6 months after Garrett walked through a door and found his mother on the floor. Martha was called to testify on day 3. Garrett sat in the courtroom gallery, Sledge beside him. Watched his mother walk to the witness stand. She looked small up there, fragile. Her hands shook as she placed one on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. But when she started speaking, her voice was steady. The prosecutor, Vance, led her through it gently. How long had she lived on her property? 45 years. Did Richard Carson ever approach her about purchasing it? Yes, 5 times over 3 years. What happened when she refused? The harassment began. Vance showed her photographs, her broken kitchen window, the threatening letters, the dent in her car from being run off the road, asked her to identify them. Martha confirmed each one. Her voice never wavered. Then came the hard part, the assault. "Mrs. McColl, can you tell the jury what happened on the evening of September 14th? Martha took a breath, looked at the jury, 12 faces watching her with varying degrees of sympathy and attention. "I received a text message that afternoon. It said to meet at the Red Canyon Saloon at 8 p.m., to bring $10,000 in cash or sign papers selling my land. I didn't have the money, I didn't want to sell, but I went anyway. Why? Because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't." "What happened when you arrived?" 4 young men were there, Wade Ruter and 3 others. They surrounded me, demanded the money. When I said I didn't have it, her voice caught. "They became violent." "Can you describe what they did?" "Mr. Ruter grabbed my wrist, twisted it. It hurt terribly. Then he pushed me. I fell, hit my head on the floor. I thought they were going to kill me." "Did anyone help you?" "My son, Garrett. He happened to be there. He stopped them." The defense attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Holbrook, cross-examined, tried to poke holes in Martha's testimony, suggested she'd exaggerated the threats, implied Garrett had coached her. Martha held firm, answered every question with quiet dignity, never raised her voice, never broke down. When she stepped down from the witness stand, the jury was convinced. Garrett could see it in their faces. Carson's defense tried to pin everything on Wade Ruter and Sheriff Blackwood, claimed Carson was a legitimate businessman who'd been betrayed by corrupt employees, that he knew nothing about the intimidation tactics or the money laundering. The prosecution demolished that argument with Carson's own emails, his own bank records, his own handwriting on documents authorizing payments to Blackwood. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Carson's face when the verdict was read showed shock, genuine shock, like he truly believed his money and power would save him, that men like him didn't go to prison. Sentencing came 2 months later, 22 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for the first 15. Carson would be 78 when he got out, the same age Martha was now. Justice, Garrett thought, had a sense of irony. Spring came to Arizona. The desert bloomed with wildflowers, purple verbena, yellow brittlebush, red Indian paintbrush. Martha's land, neglected during the long months of fear and legal battles, came back to life. Garrett helped her plant a garden. Tomatoes, squash, peppers. His father had kept a garden here 40 years ago. Now they were bringing it back. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only exists between people who've been through something terrible together and survived. "I've been thinking," Martha said, patting dirt around a tomato plant. "About what?" "Selling." Garrett's hands stopped. "Mom, you don't have to. Not to a developer, to you." He looked at her. "What?" "Sell me the land. For $1. Then it's yours. And when I'm gone, you won't have to deal with probate or inheritance taxes or any of that nonsense." "I don't want your land." "I know, but I want you to have it. I want to know that what your father built, what we protected, will stay in the family." Garrett sat back on his heels. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. Besides, you practically live here now anyway. Might as well make it official." He'd been staying at Martha's house for 7 months, had sold his trailer in Prescott, moved his garage business to a shop in Sedona, closer to her, spent every evening on the porch with his mother, watching the sunset. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was the life he wanted. "Okay," he said, "but you're not selling, you're giving. And I'm accepting with the condition that you live here as long as you want." "Deal." They shook hands, both smiling. That weekend, Garrett hosted a barbecue. The entire Hell's Angels chapter showed up. Sledge, Flint, Axel, Cyrus, Luther, Vaughn, plus wives, girlfriends, and kids. 23 people total, filling Martha's small house and spilling into the yard. Martha moved through the crowd like a queen, making sure everyone had enough food, enough drink, laughing at jokes, hugging children. For the first time in months, maybe years, she looked truly happy. Sledge pulled Garrett aside. "Your mom's doing good." "Yeah, she is." "What about you?" Garrett considered that. 6 months ago, his life had been simple, lonely but simple. Work, the club, occasional visits to his mother, no complications. Now everything was complicated. He was tied to this place, to these 2 acres of desert, tied to a 78-year-old woman who needed him, and he'd never been happier. "I'm good too," he said. A year after Carson's conviction, the local newspaper ran a feature story. How a small-town mother took down a corrupt empire. They interviewed Martha, asked her how it felt to be a hero. She laughed. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a woman who refused to give up her home." "But you stood up to Richard Carson, a man who'd terrorized dozens of people. Weren't you afraid?" "Terrified. Every day. But fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. And being human means you have a choice. Give in to the fear or act despite it." "What made you choose to act?" Martha thought about that. "My son. He came when I needed him most, even though I'd been too proud to ask. He showed me that asking for help isn't weakness, it's trust. And trust is the strongest thing there is." The article included a photo. Martha and Garrett on her porch, both smiling. The caption read, "Martha McColl and her son Garrett, the Hell's Angel who helped bring down Richard Carson. Garrett hated the photo, hated being called a hero. He hadn't done anything special, just protected his mother. Any son would do the same. Except, as Sledge pointed out, most sons weren't there when their mothers needed them. "You showed up," Sledge said. "That's what matters." "I almost didn't. If I hadn't stopped at that bar." "But you did. That's not luck, Reaper. That's fate. You were supposed to be there." "Maybe. Or maybe it was just chance. Random coincidence that saved his mother's life." Garrett didn't know, didn't care. All that mattered was the outcome. 1 year later. The house looked different now. Fresh paint, new windows, a rebuilt porch that didn't creak when you stepped on it. Garrett had spent the year making improvements, not changing anything fundamental, just restoring what time and neglect had worn down. Martha's garden flourished. She canned tomatoes, made salsa, gave jars to neighbors, started attending city council meetings, advocating for better protection for elderly residents. Became a voice for people who'd been silent too long. The quiet, elderly woman had found her voice and used it. Garrett's garage prospered. Word spread that the Hell's Angel mechanic in Sedona was honest, skilled, and fair. Business boomed. He hired 2 employees, expanded the shop. Every Sunday, he and Martha had dinner together. Sometimes just the 2 of them. Sometimes with Sledge and other brothers from the club. Always with laughter. Always with love. On the anniversary of that night at the Red Canyon Saloon, they sat on the porch at sunset. Neither had mentioned the date, but both knew what day it was. "You know what I realized?" Martha said. "What's that?" "They thought attacking me would make me go away. Give up. Disappear." She smiled. "But it did the opposite. It woke me up. Made me realize I'd been silent too long. About too many things." "You were never weak, Mom." "I was weak. But that's okay. Weakness isn't permanent. It's just a state. You can move through it, grow past it, become something stronger." "You think you're stronger now?" Martha considered. "I think I'm more myself now. The person I was always supposed to be. I just needed..." She trailed off. "Needed what?" "To know I wasn't alone. That someone had my back. That asking for help wouldn't make me a burden." Garrett took her hand, held it gently. "You're not a burden. You never were. And you'll never be alone again. I promise." They sat in silence as the sun painted the desert gold and red. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The evening wind rustled through the scrub brush. This land, this home, this family of 2, worth fighting for, worth everything. In the end, Richard Carson served 18 years of his sentence before dying of a heart attack in federal prison. Wade Rutger was released after 6 years for good behavior. Sheriff Blackwood lost his pension and spent 4 years behind bars. The property Carson had stolen was returned to the original owners where possible. 12 families got their homes back. 8 received financial compensation. Martha McColl lived on her 2 acres until she was 91. 13 more years of life, surrounded by the garden she loved and the son who'd saved her. When she passed, quietly in her sleep on a spring morning, Garrett buried her next to Earl under the cottonwood tree. Held a memorial service that drew 300 people, former victims of Carson's scheme, members of the Hell's Angels from 5 states, friends, neighbors, people Martha had helped find their voices. The priest spoke about courage and faith, about standing up to evil, about the strength hidden in the quietest hearts. But Garrett knew the real truth. His mother hadn't been saved by him. She'd saved herself. He'd just been there when she needed a hand up. That's what family did. That's what love was. And as he stood at her grave, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky, Garrett made one final promise: to honor her memory, to use his voice for those who had none, to stand up to bullies in all their forms, because that's what Martha McColl had taught him. Not with words, with action. The quiet, elderly woman who'd refused to stay quiet, who'd faced down evil and won, who'd shown him that the strongest people are often the ones who seem weakest, until the moment they decide to stand. 5 years later, Garrett Reaper McColl still lived on those 2 acres, still ran his garage, still rode with the Hells Angels. But he'd added something new, a foundation, the Martha McColl Elder Protection Fund, providing legal help, security, and support to seniors facing intimidation or abuse. Funded by donations, run by volunteers, backed by 3 chapters of Hell's Angels who'd made it their mission to protect the vulnerable. Because bullies came in many forms and needed to be reminded that some people wouldn't back down, wouldn't stay quiet, wouldn't let evil win. On the porch of the house his mother had defended, Garrett sat with Sledge, sharing a beer, watching another sunset. "You think she'd be proud?" Sledge asked. Garrett smiled. "I think she'd tell me to stop making a fuss and get back to work." "Sounds like her." "Yeah, it does." They drank in silence, and somewhere in the fading light of an Arizona evening, the spirit of a quiet, elderly woman smiled. Because she hadn't stayed quiet, she'd roared and changed the world.